Before we get started, I want to do a land acknowledgement. So our urban village, as well as Happy Cities, operates on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. So we're really grateful to be gathered here with you today. And if you would please like to add your own land acknowledgement into the chat, we would be grateful for that. So today's speakers, we're going to hear from Shieh, who is kind of the lead developer for Tomo spaces at our urban village, as well as myself and Emma from Happy Cities, Marianne and Amodio from MA+HG Architects, who is the wonderful architect behind the project, Rodrigo Alba, who is a resident of our urban village and also happens to be an architect, and Kathy Sayers, who is one of the founding members of our urban village and is a really important member of that community. So our agenda for today, Leslie's going to do a little bit of introductions about the project and how it came to be, take you through the design and how the project actually came to life. Rodrigo is going to tell you a little bit about how his life has been unfolding at our urban village in the last little while. Myself and Emma will share some of the key research findings from the study that we did. And then we're going to have an open Q&A. So Kathy is going to kick off the Q&A with her very own question, and then we're going to open up the floor to everyone else. And then we'll wrap up. So we are recording this. We're going to share it afterwards. I know there's going to be a lot of information and a lot of slides, so you can always check back afterwards to see some of the details that you missed. And we also want to thank our funders. So this research was funded by CMHC through the National Housing Strategy. And yeah, we're very grateful for their support and their flexibility as we completed this study over several years. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Leslie to tell us a little bit about how this project came to be.
Great, thank you, Madeleine. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us and for your interest in our project. I'm really honored to be sharing some of the lessons learned today with you and holding this webinar together with some of our project partners as a way of marking the completion of this project. This project was the result of really strong collaboration between our partners, and that really got us through the ups and downs. This project was 6 years in the making from the submission of rezoning, so it really is I would say a passion project probably for all of us. We're very much invested. So it did take much longer than we anticipated, but I think it's also because we tried to do so many things. This is the third co-housing project in Vancouver. So this just Vancouver proper. So we're the third co-housing project. This project has one of the first affordable home ownership homes in Vancouver. It is also one of the earlier multifamily passive house. We also, and this is a topic of today's webinar, is that we also intentionally designed for sociability, working with Happy City and then doing post-occupancy studies. So we tried to do many things. It took 6 years, but the residents moved in last year. So I'll talk a little bit about how we all got started. So next slide, please. It's said that about 70 to 80% of co-housing projects don't get built. I mean, this is not an exact stats because we know that a lot of groups do form. Acquiring land, recruiting memberships do take a long time, so we don't know exactly how many, but we do know that when we talk about how 70 to 80% of co-housing projects don't get built, most people say, yeah, like I can see that. And so our urban village, and Kathy, you can pipe in, is they thought, oh, well, how do we increase our odds? And the fact that we're also building in Vancouver being such an expensive city, that our odds of reaching move-in might be even more difficult. So our urban village started, Kathy and a couple of the earlier members started interviewing developers. And next slide. So before meeting our urban village, Tomo Spaces was already thinking about this question of how do we live happier together in densifying cities. So we know that we are moving, that most of us are not part of nuclear families with mom and dad and 2 kids living in a single family home, that we're moving towards this idea of like a modern family with different demographics, and that we are living in cities that we might not want to live in high-rise towers. So what does that new urban form might look like that would accommodate our modern family? Next slide. So we were also looking at how do we know that there are about over 100,000 double lots in Vancouver. So they're the ones that marked in gray. And so how do we build this missing middle form on double lots? And that was one of the questions at Tomo Spaces we were pondering. Next slide. So as our urban village was interviewing developers, we were also working with Happy Cities looking at, well, how do we design for sociability? And so Charles from Happy City said, hey, you guys should really meet. And so I think, was it Kathy? I think it was 14 developers later, we finally met. And so this brought this together, our collaboration between our urban village, Tomo Spaces, and Happy City. Next. And so one of the first things we did was, so this Happy City now has a Happy Homes toolkit. And so this is before the toolkit came out. We were looking at, well, what are the design principles for sociability? And I know one of the things that we want to do was to gather evidence. And as we gather evidence, we wanted to come up with design solutions and then looking at metrics so that we could go back and provide and strengthen that evidence. So say, for example, we know that like wider walkways might be a great place for social interaction, but there was no evidence that says intuitively it makes sense, but there was no evidence. And so we wanted to use this opportunity to gather evidence and to make some of these things that we think would support social interaction, but back it up. So one of the early things that we did was to think about what were the design principles that we want to test and design into this project. And these became the guiding principles for design, and you'll hear more about that from Marianne. So one of the 6 design principles was that to enable a social gradient from public to private, so that as you're arriving home or you're leaving home, that there is public, semi-public, semi-private, and then private, so that there's this gradient as you enter and exit. Then we wanted to invite people to do things together. Research has shown that when people do things together, that they build greater trust. Then the third one was keeping social group size small. We know that from research that about 12 to 15 households sharing one door is kind of that sweet spot. Usually this is urban village is 12 units. It's one of the smaller co-housing projects. Usually co-housing projects, I think, are much larger, maybe around 30 or more. And so because this is a double lot, we could fit 12, and we wanted to see if the research does show that 12 to 15 is the sweet spot, and how is that working out? Number 4 is spark frequent informal encounters. This is an important one. We usually think about social interaction being planned, that we have social activities, we formal social activities where we plan and we meet, we cook meals together, we do gardening together, but these are planned. But research has shown that informal social encounters are just as important. That quick hi, hello in the elevators or in the lobby, to not discount those, because frequent informal social encounters are also contributors of trust. Then number 5 is this idea of integrating with nature, especially in the city. And then number 6 is lengthen housing tenure. We know that as you live in a place, whether as renters or owners, the longer you live, of course, you develop greater relationships with your neighbors. And so that's also one of the reasons why we design various housing sizes, as well as so for example, we have 3 bedrooms, we have various kinds of 3 bedrooms. We also have the affordable home ownership. 3 of the 12 units are affordable home ownership units, and so that helps families stay in their homes longer. I think with that, next slide. And so last year, 2023, almost a year ago, the residents moved in. This slide shows how the project was on a double lot that had a duplex, and now it is home to for 12 families. And this just shows from recruitment to the design process with our urban village to them moving in and sharing meals. And my last slide, Madeleine, is that we are looking for 3 more families to join. So if you're interested, you could look at our Urban Village website, or you can contact me at manager@tomospaces.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Leslie. So I'm going to pass it over to Marianne to share a little bit more about the building itself.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm going to share my screen. Thanks, Leslie. I love that slide of the process. That was so cool. Let's see, share screen. There we go. Strange. Oops. Oh, it worked so flawlessly before. Just one moment, please. Sorry, everyone. There we go. Okay, are you guys seeing my screen?
Yep, it's
Wonderful.
very clear.
Great. Yay, I did it. Okay, that always feels like a bit of a win. Hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Marianne Amodio. I'm from MA+HG Architects, and since around 2009, our practice has really focused on housing alternatives that strive to address the issue of economic, social, and environmental sustainability. Most of our work would be known as missing middle projects. I'm honored to be here today with this group of people. This project was amazing. We're so happy to be the architects for this work with this wonderful, insightful group of people. Okay. Okay, so we work on a range of scales of projects that respond to the issues that I mentioned before. And in particular, we're interested in and promoters for the creation of dynamic and resilient communities that are based on sociability and sharing. We always try to reflect our core values as architects in all of our projects, which is the creation of walkable neighborly urban environments, a participation in a culture that creates community through the sharing of spaces and relies on maximum human interaction for feelings of joy and belonging. This model relies less on quantity and more on the qualitative aspects of living that makes us human. So, to describe these findings in relation to our work, we've appropriated this psychological term called social density, which means both the density in an area in terms of the number of people and the number of interpersonal reactions that are likely to happen in a set space. And for that for us, that also means looking at density as a tool to create places of sociability and sharing. And these are some of our principles and philosophies that we've developed over time, and you can see how remarkably aligned they are with both the findings of Happy Cities and with Tomo Spaces. Happy Cities was really able, as Leslie mentioned, to quantify for us just long held standing beliefs and that we had about architecture that was really intuitive and based on our training. So in all of our work, we try to check all of these boxes. In some projects, we get one or two, and others we don't. We get a few more. We don't get as many as we would like, but we do consider it our duty to strive for all of these principles within our work. And of course, with Tomo and with our urban village and with Happy Cities, we were able to check all of the boxes, which made this project just really meaningful and exciting for us as architects. So our urban village project was completed under a rezoning in the city of Vancouver under a policy at that time that was called the Affordable Housing Choices Policy for co-housing. This site, a double wide site, as Leslie mentioned, was originally zoned as a single family site that allowed for about one 5,000 square foot single family home, which seems a bit crazy right now. And we were able to increase the FSR from 0.75 FSR to 1.62, which allowed about approximately 15,000 square feet and 12 homes. So this model was really about creating a scalable, streamlined co-housing model that links affordability and sustainability and sociability goals. It's worth mentioning that our urban village is also a passive house. And we had to do a few alternative solutions and a reduction in parking. But all in all, we were able to, this was our vision for the space. Our urban village was always imagined as sort of, I always call it like a pure missing middle project. Like it's a missing middle project in both its typology as somewhere between a single family dwelling and a 6-story apartment building, as well as in its context. So down Main Street on 41st Avenue, it's literally situated between a 4-story apartment building to the north and a single family neighborhood to the south. So, so the form of development was really derived to address this context. So the raked roof form was designed to address this transition between the 4-story apartment building and the single family dwelling to the south, as well as kind of respond to this idea of one big house. So we wanted to, it's a bit of a whimsical play on the Vancouver special, as well as recognizing that that we wanted to move away from the expected 6-story traditional form that we see in Vancouver. So alongside of that, we really wanted to address these principles that we were learning more and more from Happy Cities related to public and private space, and how we can take those principles, which are really in words, and integrate them into architectural forms so that the building can start to catalyze those principles that are so meaningful to us. The first thing that we did was we created this form that has one big roof. And this singular form encompasses the partie. It's a response to the traditional gable architecture that we see throughout Vancouver and in the surrounding single family neighborhood, as well as an outward expression of this idea of the co-housing community, which was 12 families under one roof. The exterior expression is designed to create a dialogue and interface between the public and private realms and the busy street and the quiet residential community adjacent. And we did this in a number of ways. I think primarily with the main entranceway off of the quiet residential street, alongside townhouse units that are accessible from the street, gives it a more residential feel along Ontario Place, as well as more interaction with the street. The location of the common house, which you'll see throughout at the corner of Main Street and Ontario Place, is really an outward expression of what's going on inside. There's a door on that at that corner that can invite people into that common space from the outside. So all of these elements, there's that large awning over top is to add weather protection so people can stand under there and feel comfortable in that space. So all of these elements are really trying to create a pedestrian scale and an inward and outward sort of relationship with the building. On the courtyard side is really where you see what we call the sharing party. The project, the massing, really prioritized this notion of a traditional backyard. So what we did is we scribed the architectural mass in this L-shaped form around this central south-facing courtyard. This allows for this purposefully scaled down building where access to shared outdoor space is prioritized. The inclusion of the common house that you saw at the Main Street elevation allows for that space to extend outward. And we wanted to just really retain landscape and accentuate the importance of community around nature. Here you can also see the walkways, which play such an important part in this kind of small scale interaction that occurs at each level and at each patio level. These generous walkways and social stairs keep neighborly eyes on this street as well as on the shared courtyard area while encouraging interaction. So this interaction was designed to occur at varying scales, and this is something that we learned directly from Happy Cities, this idea of sociability at different scales. The main level here is the largest scale where there's interaction at the entry breezeway, gathering at the shared courtyard, of course, and at the common house. The common house we really thought of, I call it the heart and Harley calls it the hinge of this community. It's designed as 3 separate uses that can take place at one time or separately, with a lounge that's got that connection to the street that I was talking about before, an oversized kitchen which has large appliances, 2 dishwashers, a recycling station, full-size laundry. This is so that the community can make really great use of this space as a neighborhood. And the dining area, we designed that so you could have 28 people sitting in that dining area to share and eat. And that direct connection to the courtyard is super important to create this kind of central room where everybody can meet and gather. So here we can see that where this idea of sociability is occurring at a more of a micro scale, particularly in the circulation spaces. You can see these little exterior patios that we have on every floor invites interaction at the floor level, as well. These rounded extended areas on the stairs invite interaction just on your day-to-day passage up and down the stairs. These stairways are a great place to overlook, pause, and allow interaction between the suites. In the private spaces, the suites, one of the advantages of having an L-shaped partie is that all of the units are through units. That means that there's windows and glazing at both ends of the unit. For us, this allows, it allows for cross ventilation of the unit and dual aspect light. So you end up with brighter and more spacious feeling units that kind of offsets the quantity of area that you have. In our view, this makes small units feel bigger. And we also integrated a number of other strategies within the smaller units to make them feel more spacious, such as overscaled windows and a real rigor around the creation of modular kitchens and a real simplified interior design. We also debated on which side to put the bedrooms on when you have through units. And at the end, I think we made the right choice. We actually ended up putting the bedrooms on what would commonly be perceived as the noisier side of the building. And what that did was that leaves the living rooms adjacent the social corridor. So for example, if you're interacting, the idea was if you're interacting with someone on the corridor, you can invite them into your space so that your kitchen, dining, living area becomes an extension of that social corridor. So I think our ideas around Tomo were really that the materiality and the planning reflects the priorities of affordability and longevity. We wanted the building to be decidedly anti-luxury, a real everyday building that was simple with clean, unarticulated finishes that allow the space to feel open and clear, and to allow the homeowner to give their own expression. So this is a photo of Tomo when it was just completed, and I think you can start to see this kind of use of robust, simple materiality, but with a clear architectural expression. That green tile is intended to create a directionality to the front entry. There's also, from the passive house point of view, a very technical work with R59 effective walls, R60 effective slab on grade, and an R70 effective roof. We had to achieve an air tightness of 0.6 air changes per hour. OUV achieved 0.28, and really high performing mechanical and electrical systems for this work. And like I said, the expression on the interior is something that is important to us as architects. We really believe in the power of color, particularly in a gray city. We believe in the psychology of color and for color as an easy means of expression. And the OUV and Tomo spaces really embrace this idea of we kind of call this building a bit of a mullet, where the exterior expression is a bit more reserved and conservative, and it's on the inside where that joyful expression of color is really achieved. And I think it really works to also connote the areas of sociability on the outside of the building. We feel like this building just has a really big heart for such a little building. And much of that expression has been brought by the community, by the people who live there, and what we're seeing over the last year. And I think I was really excited to see the findings from Happy Cities, because this was an experiment for us. It was sort of our blue sky beliefs about what co-sharing, co-living could be like. And we're so happy to see how the spaces are being used. And we're already seeing this alignment between how we imagined the building could be used and how we designed it to catalyze community, and how in turn the people in the building are using the building to do just that. So I think I'll hand it over to Rodrigo to talk about that. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Marianne. Yeah, it's really a remarkable building. It's been great living there. So yeah, I'm gonna be talking about how all this theory and how all that planning is really reflected in our everyday lives. Give me 1 second. So yes, I'm a resident at OUB. I started living there since last July. That's when the project was completed. And it's been a great experience. I'm also an architect. I work at Agnostic Architects, and in my practice, and ever since I studied, I've been interested in how cities and buildings bring people together. So of course, this project it has been like part of understanding that theory and bringing it into reality. So I'm going to be talking about these 6 theoretical points that Happy Cities was referring to. And I'm going to be relating to them to how we live nowadays in that building. So this is the first point. So keep social group size smaller, clusters of housing featuring 8 to 15 units, as Leslie was mentioning. Within a transit-served neighborhoods are ideal and supportive social connections. So that has been true like right until now. Like we are until now 9 families living there. It has been relatively easy to organize ourselves. We are self-managed strata, so we manage the building, and it's been good to be able to know all these neighbors like much more closely. This is just a screenshot of our reality before the project started. So it was a long project, but since 2018, I think people have been meeting. So through Zoom, of course, through the pandemic, it was like Zoom meetings, and every month we would meet. So my wife, my son, and I joined the project at the end of 2022, but we've been meeting we met every month to talk about how we're going to live there, how we're going to organize ourselves. And then since we started living there, of course, we have continued with these meetings. So this is how we live now. This is in one of our common meals. I'll be speaking a little bit more about these common meals and what do they mean, but this is us today. Second point, invite people to do things together. When people self-organize to work on causes that are bigger than themselves, they feel happier, more connected to each other. So of course, that's the theory. In reality, it's also been helping us to be able to organize ourselves. Of course, this also brings us together in doing new things. This is just a screenshot of our Slack, where we plan a lot of our things. You can see all the channels we have there. This is just one of them by nothing, right? Like, oh, who wants this pepper? So who has this or who has that? So every day we like ask for something. We share, for example, we share tools. We share an e-bike. A lot of the neighbors share cars. So we have 2 cars that are shared between the neighbors. And Slack has been also a great way of communicating everything. And of course, we just knock on our doors and talk to each other. But this is also a way that we've been organizing ourselves. This is a screenshot of our teams. So we have different teams. It might seem a lot of work, but it has been great to be able to organize our building in these different ways of keeping it up. And again, this really brings us together. Like these are a couple of pictures of a couple of weeks ago, just cleaning the gutters or putting together the furniture for the common house. And again, this is just like an excuse to get together also. So yeah, this has worked. There's also committee for events, for example. So we've been doing events. This was an egg hunt that we organized for the kids. And yeah, all these events, again, help on bringing that community together. We're trying to bring the kids also into our tasks, so decorating Christmas trees or being part of the food committee. doing meals for us. So the kids are part of that integration of the community. And this is, for example, a picture of the common meal. So we have meals, mainly dinners, twice a week, or we try to do them twice a week. So this is an important part of co-housing, right? Because it's also where you get to interact more closely and talk to neighbors. These are also important during winter, where during summer, for example, when it's not raining, when it's not cold, we gather outside a lot. But during winter, having these common meals in that common house, like that space is great. Like it's really having that kitchen in the center, for example. We sometimes prepare food together, or just put there our meals and explain how what we have prepared for everyone. So we rotate our meals, so everyone cooks for everyone once in a while. So every probably a month and a half. And then we get to just try everyone's dishes, which everyone's done an amazing job there. Everyone's our chefs there. And then coming to the architecture, so this thing that Marianne was talking about, how do this gradient from public to private spaces has worked? I think it's great. Like this courtyard typology has really helped us in keeping a tight community. So apart from what Marianne said about cross ventilation, so and inviting people to our common areas that are next to our corridors, it has also helped in having eyes to the courtyard and eyes to the corridor. So, for example, we feel now it's safe to leave our kid. He's 5, just running around, because we know that our neighbors are going to be there looking after him, right? So this courtyard typology is amazing. In first, the courtyard has become kind of a playground for our kids, but yeah, we do play with them there, and that's where we stored some of the bikes, and yeah. This has become a huge playground. But also this, for example, these intermediate spaces, these landings or big landings at the walkways, we do use them for having meals out there, or having social interactions. People like neighbors would just write in Slack, "Oh, we're having a cup of wine, who wants to join?" And then people just go out and hang around in those spaces. Plus, the third floor, for example, has an amazing view to the west in like Oak Ridge and the mountains. So it's a very nice space to gather. So yeah, this is, as I mentioned, we use them a lot during the summer when it's not raining, but also during the winter when it was snowing, for example. We just went out and starting. This is our neighbor Christine just throwing a snowball at us. So we've been using those spaces. This is a short video of my kid playing with the neighbor's kid. So yeah, these white walkways, Leslie was saying, in theory they should work, and as you can see, they do. Like our kids play there. It's full of planting now. Like I'm gonna be speaking a little bit about it later, but we do grow plants there. Some of them edible. So yeah, it's been great. And then the common house, right? Where we do our common meals. We've sometimes organized like game days or game nights, and it has become also kind of an interior playground for the kids. So yeah, that common house has really become the heart of the community. And even interior spaces, as Marianne was mentioning, this is a picture of my son. And he does that every day. He goes into our neighbor's Kathy. Kathy will be speaking later. He'll go into her house to watch TV and to talk to Kathy for at least 15 minutes a day, right? So it's great for us as parents to be able to have that trust. And it's, of course, I think great for our neighbors. I hope Kathy thinks the same. she jokes that he's there just for the TV, but I'm sure he's not. So it's been great to have that interaction. Then spark frequent informal encounters. Yeah, of course, this goes hand in hand with how the building has been designed. And as I said, it has proven to be true. These informal encounters have been done through the corridors, through the courtyard, and in the common house. These might look like stage pictures, but it's not true. Like, we really talk to each other between walkways. We have a typology in Mexico. I'm originally from Mexico. We have a typology called the vecindad, which is a typology which has a very narrow courtyard, and is well known because people would talk to each other, shout between the different units, and everyone will know each other because they just shout between one another. And this has become our vecindad, really. Like, it's really how we have been using these spaces. The fifth point, integrate with nature. I mean, maybe this is not so related to UV, but in last year we used to have community garden. We were part of a community garden, a lot of our families. And this year we have been focusing that more on the building. When I say we, it's mainly other neighbors, like that have been growing food or have been growing plants in our building. And it's again a way of social interaction. Kids will come with other neighbors that know about gardening and learn about how to garden, for example. So that has been great as well. And of course, the last point is lengthen housing tenure, which it's like the main goal, right? Like, if we're thinking that these type of neighborhoods make us happy, will in theory make us stay longer as well. And I think this will be true. From what I know from everyone's very happy here and will want to continue living in this place. Yeah, this is my last slide, just a short video of our kids playing in the common house. This is how it looks. This is how our common meals look like. I mean, this is the playground that we have formed in this great building. So yeah, thanks everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rodrigo. You said it much better than I could, obviously having lived in the building. So thank you for sharing all those amazing images and videos. That some of them I haven't seen yet. So yeah, really wonderful. And Marianne, thank you so much as well to share all the great design thought that went into this building. I mean, it's really apparent when you step in that it was like very well thought through, and every detail was really thought about intentionally. So you will finally hear from Emma and I about kind of some of the findings we did kind of at the tail end of all of this work. We tried to quantify the results of really, you heard from Rodrigo how it feels to live in this building. We wanted to see if we could capture that through our research. So I'll share my screen. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Happy Cities, we've been around for about a decade now. We came out of Charles Montgomery's book, and now he's online today, Happy City, and really our goal and our mission is to create happier cities. And one of those key pieces that we have looked at over the last few years is actually housing, which is where my work comes in. So we're really interested in how housing can help solve some of these big challenges that we have in our cities, like affordability, like loneliness, like climate change. So Tomo, our urban village, is a really great example of something that is trying to solve all of these together through a really well thought out project. And we get to engage people from across the housing system, from residents to property managers to landlords to architects to developers to planners and funders. And this gives us a really interesting broad picture view to understand what is actually happening in our building. So our work includes design audits, creating policy and design guidelines, lots of engagement, post-occupancy evaluations like we did for our urban village, as well as research and education. So Anson, I think we'll put a bunch of links in the chat. Please feel free to check out some of our research online. And this is just a snapshot of our Happy Homes Toolkit, which Leslie mentioned at the beginning. So the Our Urban Village work with Tomo and actually preceded the Happy Homes Toolkit. This was released in 2017, and it has been really a launching pad for most of my work over the last almost 5 years with Happy Cities. So really, oops. Sorry about that. The Happy Homes Toolkit is really looking at all of these facets of our housing that we need to think about in order to create places that are happy, fulfilling, and healthy for people to live in. So before we kind of get into sharing the results, I wanted to share, some of the background of why, learning from communities like our urban village is so important. So we're really hardwired for social connection, and it's always been core to health and survival. People with strong positive relationships are happier, they're healthier, they're more productive at work, and they live on average 15 years longer than people who are socially isolated. And social connection isn't just about close relationships with friends and family, like we see at our urban village, but also about these informal and casual encounters with people in the community, which are also really beneficial for our well-being. So we look at this kind of broad range of social interactions in our work. These are some of the recent research numbers from a study that we did. So we heard from over 2,000 residents in Metro Vancouver, and we wanted to know, how are we doing in terms of loneliness and isolation since the COVID pandemic? So this is a challenge that more and more of us are feeling lonely and isolated. So we found that 1 in 5 residents reported 1 in 5 residents felt that their neighborhood was lacking a sense of community. 1 in 5 feel lonely often, and 46%, which is almost half, feel lonely at least sometimes. And it's not just in Vancouver that this problem is happening. So loneliness has been reaching epidemic levels in many countries. So you'll see, for example, the US Surgeon General recently released a report highlighting loneliness as an epidemic. And this stat has been shared around a lot, but chronic loneliness and social isolation can be as damaging to health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and can increase risk of premature death by as much as 50%. So these are really serious things that we're dealing with. And as you saw with Rodrigo's story, the solutions can actually be really joyful and really bring a lot of benefits to our lives. We also know, and this has been more and more documented, that connections with your neighbors are really important, and they can be one of the key ways that we can actually address this crisis of social isolation and loneliness. Our neighbors are our closest points of social support. They're people that we can ask for, to borrow a cup of milk or to give away peppers we don't need, to water our plants, even to watch TV with our kid for 15 minutes. So these are relationships that a lot of us don't have the privilege of having in the way that our urban village has demonstrated. And we know that there's a ton of benefits to knowing our neighbors better. So this was kind of the idea of the social well-being post-occupancy study. This is not something that has been done a lot, especially in Canada. So it's not a kind of a mainstream form of research, but we strongly believed in piloting this, and we thought that this was a really great community to do it with. So our kind of core question was, can housing design nurture deeper relationships between neighbors? And I'll let Emma share the kind of the details of these findings, but I'll give you a spoiler. We've spent hundreds and hundreds of hours looking into this, and we strongly believe that the answer is yes. So, this is a really great demonstration project, and it's one of very few that exist. I guess a unicorn, as some people would say, but I think there is so much that we can learn from it that we can apply to other buildings in our communities. And as kind of a simple illustration of how we talk about social connection and the relationship with the built environment, is this diagram that I use a lot. So we say that, you know, the building design can help connect neighbors by enabling these spontaneous interactions. So Marianne talked a lot about this, about the walkways, you know, the breezeway, how all of this was placed very carefully and intentionally in the building. So we're trying to facilitate these interactions. And then over time, we have things like doing things together. So cleaning the gutters, planting plants, cooking, sharing meals, those kind of all accelerate our relationships into the next level, which is, you know, where communities like our urban village land. So at the number 5, where mutual support is happening. So people are taking each other to doctor appointments. They're checking in on each other when they're sick. They're helping each other out. They're you know, an understanding ear, a friend when you need one. And this is what we want for more people in our cities. And this is so this is what we did kind of through our research. We, again, thanks CMHC for their kind of flexibility, because we got the grant way back in 2019, I believe, and weren't actually able to deliver the report until now because we had to wait for residents to actually move into the building. So it's been a long study, and it's been a really a great pleasure to work with the whole team. But so early in the process, we did kind of a space assessment. So we wanted to see what were the social potential of different spaces, which allowed us to design the right questions for the study. We did a baseline study, which was basically, we wanted to see where people were at before they moved into the building. And then we did 2 rounds of post-occupancy study, which were maybe a bit less spaced out than we would have wanted to originally, but given the kind of the timeline and we needed to deliver the report, that's kind of where they ended up. We did 3 months and 6 months post-occupancy. So we'd love to ideally do another round, maybe in a year, to see where things have evolved and what we're going to keep kind of the relationship with OUV. Another collaborator that I think is online today is Hannah Nagami of Perkins Eastman, who helped us analyze all of this data. So because we had such a small sample size, we also did a lot of comparison and alignment with our survey questions to make sure that we could compare, for example, the baseline well-being measured for the 12 families with wider samples that we already have. And this is a visualization of the building. So we were inspired by this diagram that Schemata Workshop did for our Capitol Hill co-housing building, which was really highlighting all of the social spaces of the building. So you can really see all of these spaces in green are the common spaces. And you can really see how much of the building is actually dedicated to common space. But at the same time, you'll see, you know, through the learnings that these really well-designed private spaces were also key to making sure that the social life of the building worked well. So again, we did a survey and interview round before everyone moved in. We did one 3 months after and then 6 months after. So we were able to kind of compare the results of all of these well-being findings. And the findings were really telling of what was actually happening at the building. So again, just a way to quantify what, you know, the qualitative kind of stories that are coming out of our urban village. And this is just, you know, to tell you a little bit more about our methodology. We use this a lot. So we talk about well-being variables, different facets of well-being that we already know from established research are important for health and happiness. In this particular study, we looked at 12 different elements of well-being through our questions. These include tenure, sense of belonging, safety, spatial inclusion, which is how comfortable you feel in accessing common spaces, trust, comfort, exposure, which is that access to private and public and the transition between them, sociability, engagement, and perceived health. So when we ask questions in our surveys and interviews, these were kind of the answers that we were looking at. And we have all of this kind of documented. If you're, you know, a data person or a question nerd, please reach out to Emma and I will share all the methodology and questions with you as well. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Emma to tell us about some of the key well-being findings that we found through our work.
Thank you, Madeleine, and hi, everyone. Thank you for being here today. So what did we learn through the study? As Madeleine mentioned, overall, we found very positive results, suggesting that the new building and the community at our urban village really are great for happiness and well-being, and I'll just share a brief snapshot of those today. So one of the biggest well-being changes that we observed and that you probably got a sense of through Rodrigo's presentation was how residents' social connection, both with neighbors and more broadly in their lives, has increased significantly since living in our urban village compared to in their previous homes. And the study really supports the idea that even a relatively small co-housing community with just 12 units can support frequent and strong social connections by embedding these communal activities and spaces into people's daily and weekly routines. So the increase in social connection at our urban village really speaks to both the intentional community building aspect of the project, but also the increased frequency and quality of interactions among neighbors. So just 6 months after moving in, we can see that regular and positive interactions really translate into deeper relationships with neighbors and a greater sense of connection. So remarkably, our study found that nearly everyone reported having 4 or more people in their life they can confide in after moving in, compared to just 60% before move-in. And amazingly, 100% never or rarely feel lonely at our urban village. And this number is quite incredible because it's significantly higher than before move-in, when just 40% of residents reported feeling lonely never or rarely. And it's also significantly higher than what we saw in our survey of residents in Metro Vancouver, where just under a third report feeling lonely never or rarely. And of course, many residents did note an adjustment period to learning to live in community, as they weren't used to socializing with neighbors every day in their previous homes. But overall, people shared that this adjustment was really a lot easier than expected. And they've been really enjoying spending time together and chatting with their neighbors in spaces like the courtyard and the stairways, as you can see in this photo. The other 2 well-being variables that we saw really significant increases in were the sense of belonging and trust that neighbors had in each other from living in this intentional community. And belonging and trust are built in large part through shared participation in regular meals and activities, as well as shared management of the building. And this is really important indicator of well-being, given research that shows when you feel like you have something to contribute to, or when you feel like you're needed by your community, it helps increase your sense of connection and belonging. So after move-in, we were really pleased to see that every resident that we surveyed or interviewed felt that they have something important to offer to events and programs in their building or neighborhood, which was also a significant increase compared to before move-in, where only 40% felt that way. And neighbors also feel a stronger sense of trust in one another in our urban village, with 100% everyone we spoke with reporting that they have 4 or more neighbors they can ask for favors from, meaning anything from borrowing tools or cooking ingredients to asking for advice, asking for help with childcare, or even help when you're sick. And again, this is a really massive increase compared to what we saw before move-in, where no one had 4 or more neighbors to ask for favors from, and actually close to half had nobody that they felt they could ask for neighbors from in their building or on their street. And through the study, we also sought to connect changes in residents' well-being to particular design choices that were made in the design and development process for this building. So as Marianne mentioned, units in our urban village were very intentionally designed to promote comfort for residents and to allow them to control their social exposure to the community, which is really important because in this very intensely social community, sometimes people need a safe and comfortable space to retreat to when they feel like they need to recharge or spend some time alone. And the care and attention that's been given to unit design really comes through in the surveys that we conducted with residents, where 100% are satisfied with the natural light in their private unit, thanks in part to that having windows and doors on both sides. And also no one is dissatisfied with the temperature control in their unit, again, likely reflecting the design of the building and the cross ventilation. There was also a lot of attention given to social circulation spaces in the design of our urban village. So the outdoor walkways that you see here in this photo are extra wide and comfortable for socializing, and they include these small social nooks or patios where you can chat with a neighbor or read a book, share a coffee, or just enjoy the sun. And this design really sought to increase opportunities for neighbors to bump into one another. And we really see that these design strategies have been quite successful so far when looking at the places that people interact most with their neighbors. So in our survey, we asked people about, how often do you interact with neighbors in all these different spaces in the building? And the most common places that neighbors reported interacting with each other in on a daily or weekly basis was really the shared outdoor walkways and the stairway or the elevator. So in both cases, this was a huge increase in interaction compared to in their previous homes, where most people rarely interacted with neighbors in these spaces. And this photo here just shows the lovely connections between the units, the outdoor walkways, the social nooks, and the stairways. And you have the courtyard below where the kids are playing, and then up on the third floor, you can see the adults having a gathering. And finally, we looked at how shared amenities in our urban village, including the courtyard and the common house, create a really strong community heart by offering space for diverse activities and extending the space that people have available to them in their private units. And we found these spaces are also really important for social connection, although they have slightly less frequent interaction than the walkways and the stairways. However, they're still a really important hub for social interaction. As you saw, the common house hosts weekly meals, and these spaces are also really intentionally designed to accommodate, different needs and uses and activities among neighbors. So our study found that around 3/4 interact on a weekly basis in the lobby or the common house, largely through the meals, but also through other activities. Around 3/4 also interact on a monthly basis in the bike room or bike parking area. And almost everyone interacts weekly or monthly in the courtyard and in the social nooks. So that's just a brief snapshot of our research. Again, as Madeleine mentioned, more is available online, and I'll pass it back to her to share some policy implications and learnings as we wrap up the presentation.
Thank you, Emma. So yeah, just the last set of slides, and then we'll go into Kathy for the first question. So one of our kind of questions coming out of all of this is, if living in community and these co-housing forms are so good for us, then why are there only 3 co-housing communities in Vancouver? So as our study showed, there's many factors that are actually impacting our ability to connect in our housing. So it's not just the way we design buildings, but also kind of what happens afterwards. So co-housing communities are really intentional in bringing in programming and doing activities together. That's not something that typically happens in our apartments and our condos. And the other piece that we've been really interested in at Happy Cities is the kind of policy. So, why did this building take 6 years to build? There was lots of reasons. Policy did play a role in it as well. And we see that playing out for a lot of kind of these more innovative housing models in our cities. And there's been a lot of changes in housing policy in BC. There's a big push to build housing faster, but also a big push to add more housing choices, particularly ones that support our social well-being. So one of the things that we have been talking about a lot is redefining social space. So for example, if we're seeing that most of the social interactions are happening in these walkways and courtyards, how can we redesign our municipal policies to recognize that? Because traditionally, cities will say you need X square feet of amenity space, and that's usually defined as a square box form, not a long corridor. So often, these shared corridors aren't counted as amenity space, and so they add cost to the project, and they might cause challenges when trying to actually approve these buildings. The other piece is thinking about how can we prioritize social design in all types of housing. So we're starting to collect more and more evidence that the way we design these buildings actually matters for social interaction. So why isn't this mandatory in all of our buildings? Thinking intentionally about social spaces, rather than just checking a box that, yes, I have X square feet of amenity space. And, we don't know the quality of that space. Where is it located in the building? Is that room actually going to get used? And often what we see is that it doesn't. So this like beautiful, messy life that we're seeing, happening at OUV does not happen in most of our multi-unit housing buildings. So we're really trying to challenge planners, developers, and architects to think more intentionally in the way that Marianne's team did about the architecture, in the way that Leslie's team did about, really intentionally trying to build these communities. And we also know that not everyone is going to live in co-housing. It's going to continue to be a small percentage of our housing. So how can we bring these really great ideas into traditional rental housing or strata corporations? Finally, there's also a lot of kind of innovative and policy code solutions floating out right now. So this is the diagram I was talking about from the Schemata workshop. You'll notice something interesting about this building, which is located in Seattle. It's built around a single egress stair. So this is a zoning, a building code thing that is not allowed in BC. So BC is currently exploring whether they will allow single egress stair buildings. But basically, the idea is that without this rule in place, Seattle was able to build these kind of novel form of taller buildings on small sites. So that zoning innovation actually made it possible to actually build this building. And for more info background about this, Yute Lee from About Here, who's been also doing our videos, did a really great video on point access blocks. And there was also a recent urbanarian competition that looked at decoding density, so looking at some of these barriers to building different forms of housing in our cities. And finally, if cities are really serious about playing a part in making social connection core to our housing, are there ways to actually incentivize co-housing? So it's financially and technically complex to build co-housing, as we saw from the project team. It takes a lot of energy, a lot of champions to actually push these buildings through. So how can municipalities and developers play a role in making this process easier, not harder, and making innovative projects like this one a lot more easy to build? So yeah, please check out the full report on our website. There's lots more data in there, and we're happy to connect on the methodology and the findings with you separately if you want to reach out to us. So with that, I will conclude these slides, and we're going to pass it over to Kathy Sayers, who is another wonderful resident of OUV, to ask the first question, and then we'll open it up to a general Q&A.
Okay, well, the question I was going to ask is what needs to happen for more of this kind of housing to be built? But Happy City answered that handily in their last bit. So the question I will ask is to Leslie and to Marianne. What were the challenges and benefits of working from the beginning with our urban village, of knowing the people that you were building for? So Leslie, would you like to go first?
Sure. And I also see that Mark, who's also, Mark, if you want to wave, also part of Tomo in the audience. So yeah, thanks for the great question. I was also thinking about your first question about why we don't see more. So maybe I'll just, one of the things that popped in to my mind is that, it did take 6 years for 12 units. And I think 2 of those 6 was to go through rezoning. And so I think having to rezone a smaller project like this did take up quite a bit of time. So that's kind of just one thought about that. And this, in your second question about the I guess the challenges that advantages, you know, it's really rare to be able to know the people that you're building for, and even rarer, I mean, seeing Rodrigo's presentation, even more rare to see how families that you've designed and built for are using the space, are living their everyday life. It's been really great. And Kathy, you're one of the founding members. We've known each other from day one. Really appreciate the collaboration as well as the friendship. Mark, do you have anything to add? Marianne?
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. I think for us, while we have a lot of these principles that we design for, and we know that at the end of the day, we're designing for people, there is still like a certain anonymity to what we're doing. Like we're sort of making kind of our best guess generalizations about what our like intrinsic human needs are. So to meet Kathy and to meet other people from the OUV, it really made the project personal for us. And I think that lent a hand in our development of the design and the development of the work. Like we knew the people we were designing for. The other thing that I think it did was I remember public hearing. Leslie, do you remember public hearing or public open house?
Of
During our
course.
rezoning stage, our public open house during rezoning stage. And I remember, you know, looking back on the time now, this project was very innovative. It was larger scale than what the neighbors were used to seeing. And there were a lot of people at the open house who were opposed to the idea of a bigger building. And I think having members of our urban village at that public open house meant that we could introduce people to their neighbors and they could stop seeing density as physical building and start seeing density as people and neighbors and relationships and connections. And I think having that group present during those times of approval was really essential.
And I'm wondering if people are putting questions in chat. And Madeleine, are you going to field that?
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. So yeah, we're kind of opening up the floor for the last 15 minutes. If you're welcome to ask the question in the chat or put up your hand. I see, Diana, you have your hand up, so maybe we'll just let you unmute yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, I have so many questions, and I'll just say very briefly that this co-housing, co-living is something I've been very interested in for a number of years now, but with no real kind of knowledge of who else was, or it being something that was becoming even vaguely mainstream. So it's just so exciting to see this be iterated and so successfully as well. And you know, there's so many things I'd like to ask, but I guess you know, I'd love to try to set up a project like this in Montreal, where I'm currently living, well, where I will be living shortly. Understanding that, you know, many of the spaces that people live in are very regimented. People live in their small kind of, you know, in their homes or apartments. And the culture, I guess, is such a hard thing to change in terms of trying to get people to think around the benefits of living together. Although I think that once they do start thinking about it, they see it. But I guess, are there models that exist that you're aware of in which it's co-living, this type of model that also encompass things like urban farming directly into the living area or around the living area, things like you know, shared workshops, and that kind of encompass a little bit more of a public inviting in, or kind of I guess an expansion of this type of project, or is there a sense that may be too ambitious at this stage, that the focus should be on just trying to get the culture generally to feel good about living in or cohabiting as a first port of call.
Well, if you're going to be moving to Montreal, I think there's a group in Montreal. I think it's Village. It's also our urban village, I think, but it's
Cool.
I don't know if there's anybody from that group in the audience today. If there is, maybe you can put your contact information in the chat. So they're based in Montreal, and also I think with our urban village, we focus more on with this project. We're looking more at co-housing in an urban setting. But definitely there are projects, I think in more traditional co-housing, it started more in a suburban context. So there are other models out there. Rodrigo, I know you did some research when you were in school about co-housing. I don't know if you have models to share.
Yes, no, as I think as you mentioned, Leslie, a lot of the co-housing models were more suburban, and that's where a lot of the growing food and gardening was introduced. Like I know a couple of them in Portland, for example, where they have a huge garden where they grow their food, like most of their food, and they're able even to sell food to their neighbors. There are models, similar models in Europe, like co-housing is also growing a lot in Europe. So most of the models are similar. So there are either the thing that changes is if it's a cooperative or a strata, but to be honest, the thing that changes it is the co-housing. So it could be a co-housing cooperative, a co-housing strata, or a co-housing rental. But the point is that there is an intentional community behind it, right? So that's the most important part. You have a community of neighbors that want to do it, and that's why forming a group since the early stages it's important.
Awesome. Okay, I think Anson has pulled some questions from the chat for us, so I'll let him ask the first one.
All right, so I think one question that Scott had was on making co-housing more available for lower income residents. Scott, would you like to read out your question, or do you want me to read out the full thing? Okay, so the question was, how do you develop or design a similar product that is available to lower income residents? This is still a very high-end housing aimed to a very certain income bracket, while issues with zoning can be directed at the municipalities. 12 units isn't a stretch for medium density lots.
Yeah, so maybe I can start us off with this one. Yeah, absolutely. Traditionally, co-housing has been really, lived in by people with higher incomes. So, Leslie did mention some of the work they did around having some affordable units. That was something that also other communities like the one in North Vancouver, Driftwood, also did. But it remains a small percentage of the affordable housing units. I would encourage you to look at Cohere, which is not traditional co-housing, but it's another building in Vancouver that has kind of like a similar community agreement in the way that they actually live together, but is affordable and supportive housing for residents. So it is possible, but it is building affordable housing is incredibly difficult. And then adding onto a co-housing model that is 100% affordable, I don't think anyone has managed to do that yet. Leslie, I don't know if you want to add on to that in terms of what you did for Tomo.
Yeah, so with the 12 units, we took the additional density from rezoning, and we with rezoning in Vancouver, you developers or the project pays a community amenity contribution. And so in this project, the amenity contribution, part of the amenity community amenity contribution went into creating the affordable homeownership homes. What we did was it was 3 homes, but we wanted to make the homes with a steeper discount. So that's why it was only spread across 3 homes, and in the what we were able to achieve was about 30-35% below market for those 3 homes.
I'd also like to say, Kathy Sayers here, that co-housing rarely is below market, if ever. And the reason is, that lovely common space we have. Well, in Vancouver, the 1,100 square feet of common space adds $1.5 million that has to be split among the families. So it's really hard to develop co-housing with the additional common space needed and to be completely affordable. I don't know of a co-housing community that succeeded at that.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to what we've been trying to do with this research, is recognizing that co-housing is still very much kind of like a very innovative housing model, and it's going to take a long time to scale it up. So what can we actually learn from these communities that we can bring to rental housing, to larger, more dense models of housing? That, not everyone wants to live in a full co-housing community, but I think a lot of people have this desire to feel more connected and have the sense of community, and there are other ways to achieve that through programming in rental housing. Through, there are lots of really great stratas in the province that are working collaboratively in a kind of a co-housing way. There are also a lot of them who are not. So I think there's a lot of education and kind of work around intentionally bringing social connection into projects at all stages, from how we're designing our policies, how developers are thinking about space, how architects are thinking about space, and then there is a wider social issue. So there are some trade-offs that OUV residents are making in order to live in community. It's not, it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of effort, but it is really, really rewarding at the same time. So there's a social shift that is needed from us to ask for more community. And there are ways to actually build intentional communities where we live already. So yeah, I think a lot of system-wide shifts that are needed and happening, but I think co-housing is a really great model that I hope continues to grow in Canada and get more recognition from funders, for example, CMHC and BC Housing, to say, like, we should incorporate these things into the buildings that we're developing as well. Anthony, do you have another question lined up for us?
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 ways to kind of follow up with that question, because one way is to go further into the financing bit, and the other is related to zoning. So maybe we'll go really quickly with Mike's question first. Mike asked if zoning in Vancouver has changed for the better since this project started or completed.
Yeah, sorry.
You can talk about the multiplex. Go ahead. I was going to talk about the multiplex. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
Leslie. Yeah, I think zoning in Vancouver has changed significantly since the time that we started Tomo, for the better, definitely. I think and the tide has shifted from a cultural perspective, I think. So at the time of Tomo, we had a RS district schedule that was an exclusive zoning for single family over like 80% of our land mass, and that has now changed to an R1-1 zoning, which permits up to 8 units of multiplex. We also have a new RR1, a relatively new RR zone, which is 1 block off of our arterials, which allows for up to 4-story apartment buildings in a secure housing rental model. So I think we've seen and changes to other district schedules and official community plans, and of course the province's transit-oriented areas policies that are really a sea change in how we're developing density and will be developing density throughout our city. I think this has come because people have finally, after many years of opposing densification, I think people are really understanding that it's their own children or their grandchildren who can't afford to live in their own neighborhoods or the neighborhoods that they grew up in, and those neighborhoods are essentially emptying out. So I think there's been an attitude shift since we started Tomo. So that opposition that we saw at that public open house is now it's still there. Like, I think people are concerned about change in their neighborhoods, as they should be, and that's warranted. But it's also being measured by the voices of the people who really need it, and the voices of people who are embracing this kind of attitude of living together. And to me, that's been the biggest sea change that I've seen is the principles that we put in OUV aren't so much co-housing principles to me. The reason why they're successful is because this group of people believes in sharing their life with a community of strangers. And that community of strangers over time becomes family. And I think that attitude, I think we've been in a bit of a cult of individualism, especially since COVID, where everybody sort of needs to have their own space and live alone with their own backyard. And I think that attitude is also changing. So when we see a cultural shift, we see policy shift. The policy is usually a little bit behind the culture, but it gets there.
So we have about a minute left, but there are two chunky kind of themes of questions to go with. I don't know if people want to stay longer, but we can try now with a question on the design and accessibility, and maybe this can touch on multiple questions at once with one of your answers. But so Oka had a question on multi-generational living and accessibility. So Oka, if you don't mind, I'll just read the whole question. But the question was, one of the hallmark of co-housing is generational living. We know that space is a premium, but notice that the designs of the co-housing don't have elevators to accommodate senior or handicapped citizens. I also know having elevators raises the cost of construction. Were there any ideas on how to do this? And then someone else also was asking about, how do you get from the outside sidewalk or parking area to your unit? Is it exterior stairs or walkways? Interior stairs? Is there elevator? So maybe this question, the answer can do two birds, one stone.
Yeah, so with the elevator, I don't, Kathy, I don't know if you want to jump in as well. There's no elevator, but there's a lift. And this was a decision by our urban village to, yes, an elevator would have added cost. And so our urban village did a vote. And I think the community decided to put in a what they call like a caravan tow lift. So it's not technically an elevator. I know, Marianne, you probably know more as well.
Yeah, but it's not technically like a hydraulic elevator, but it operates and acts the same way as an elevator. So you push a button, the doors open, you enter, and this one, the Lula lifts are lit slower than normal elevators, but they do allow for 100% access to all the levels of the building.
I'd like to say in January, I broke my leg. And so I used the Lulu lift. And the other thing was that my neighbors went to the grocery store. I mean, if they were going to the grocery store, they said, "What do you need?" They schlepped for me for, a very short term. And we also use the elevators if we've got heavy load or the Lula lift, heavy loads or strollers. So there is a way around it, but I'd say 100% of us prefer the stairs because it's actually quicker to walk up 3 flights than take the Lula lift. So at this point, I think all of us use the stairs when it's not, yeah.
Yeah. Also note that, the Vancouver building bylaw and the BC building code coming up, have what are called adaptable housing requirements. So each suite is designed for aging in place, essentially. So that's related to clearances in bathrooms, creating areas to put future guardrails. The public areas of the building are designed to be accessible. That was required by code. So it's a sloped site at the back. So there are ramps that take you down, up and down through the level, as well as stairs. There's a fully accessible washroom in the common house. So I think we've done our best, and then beyond that with the addition of the lift, because that wasn't technically a code requirement.
Cool. Okay. Madeleine, do we have time for more questions?
Yeah, as long as Marianne and Leslie and Kathy and Rodrigo don't have to run, we can do a few.
I can probably be here
maybe.
till about 11:15.
Okay. So we have one on finance, or one or two on financing. So Diane was asking, what is the financial investment required for co-housing members? And Sue asked, I get a little similar, did this project face financing barriers along with the approval barriers at the city level?
Because this is co-housing light, so Kathy, please jump in. The way we partnered, I think typically in a traditional co-housing community, the co-housing community themselves are the developer. And so in this collaboration, us as the developer, we acquire the land, we hire the consultants, and our relationship with our urban village was more like a pre-sale. However, we rather than waiting till pre-sale to engage the community, we engaged the community from day one. So we took the pre-sale model, and just building on our collaboration and trust, we started engaging early. We designed together. They made certain decisions that would be more how they intend to live together. And so, yeah, Kathy, I don't know if you wanted to add from the community side, what were some of the financial obligations that you guys put in place?
Well, with co-housing, you are on two tracks. You're building a community and you're building a building. And so I've been in this project 2 years longer than Leslie, because it took us 2 years to find her. And what we did to build the community is we asked for a deposit to show that people were serious about being in the community, which in the first iteration was like $500. But we realized we needed more skin in the game. And so eventually we asked for a deposit of $10,000. $2,000 went to the community for legal fees, for babysitting, for consultations, that kind of thing. And $8,000 went towards their unit. And that let us know that people were serious about being in the community. After that, it was Tomo, Leslie's group, asking us for the deposit, the normal deposit you would need to buy a pre-sale. So I think eventually we all put in 20%. Before building, and then the remainder when the building was done.
Great. Okay, and I think we can end with one final question, which is, yeah, a nice way to wrap things up. Christina asked, if there's one thing you would change in hindsight in the design, what would it be? And actually, well, it's a two-part question. Christina also asked, in a close-knit community like this, can conflict arise? And if so, how is it managed?
Kathy and Rodrigo, I'm curious to see, like, what would you have changed that we didn't think of?
Rodrigo, you got a thought?
You can say nothing too.
I don't think it's a change, but the passive house component has been a challenge to get everyone to understand it. So I'm sure people are familiar with passive house, but it's a very, very tight envelope that we have. So for example, if you have any heat gains, or if you have like solar gains, or if it's summer and it's very high in temperature, passive house also tends to keep the heat inside of the house, for example. And we have HRVs, which are ventilating our units as it is very, very tight. We normally keep our windows closed and the HRV ventilates the house. So has been a new way of dealing with the building, and it has been challenging for some of our neighbors. So I don't think I would change it, because I mean, I'm completely in favor of passive house design and the way it reduces the energy. It's just about how to maybe communicate and try to bring that culture into the building and the inhabitants, right, and the residents. So that's something we as architects have to work with, and how to explain maybe to the people that are moving there how to live with it. But everything else has been great, I think. I'm sure, Kathy, if you have any other comments.
No, I was surprised and delighted. Our agreement with Tomo was that we would have input on the common house only. So we had no input. We had less input than most pre-sales on, finishings, doorknobs, that kind of thing, because they own the land, they took the financial risk of the building. So we didn't want to drive them crazy. So when we moved in, for instance, I don't think any of us knew our building was going to be green. We were surprised and generally delighted. I think our common house, like the lighting in there, looks like a work of art to me. I've been really pleasantly surprised. In terms of conflict, we're living closely with other human beings. Of course, there's going to be conflict. We have something called a community relations team. And we have regular workshops on how do you deal if somebody steps on your toes, how to communicate. You've stepped on my toes, not this is World War III. Just how do you go back and forth in a community to let people know what's going on. And once there's this level of trust in the community, you assume good intent. So it's down to problem solving. It's not down to huge emotions. It's like, this isn't working for me. What can we do about it? We have this concept that I'm trying to introduce to the community, which is oops and ouch. And oops is when you've said something stupid and you want to take it back. And you've said something that was insensitive or something. And ouch is you stepped on my toes. And so to take the sting of it out, of it being a big deal, and just normally living together is how we handle it.
I think one of the things that came out of the report, typically when we think about living in community, it is a little bit, it can be romanticized. But I think one thing that came out of the report, because the post-occupancy study was done in 2 parts, that there was an adjustment period. And I think sometimes we don't recognize that living in community it does take some time, and like what Kathy mentioned, like that there is a process that needs to be worked out, and it sounds like OUV has put something in place for that transition period.
Yeah, and I will add that, you see conflicts in non-cohousing buildings, right? But the difference is that they often don't have that trust and those communication channels. So you see that, the only interactions you have with your neighbors are negative ones. They're noise complaints, or, your kids are too loud in the courtyard, or things like that, right? But when you have that base level of trust, it becomes, less personal and less World War III. But it's like, hey, I'm just going to go over and ask the person, can we do this differently, or can we find a solution? So it's all like reinforcing itself over time. But yeah, like we all know that relationships take work, and there will always be conflict.
There's
Yeah.
one more question if you want to squeeze it in, but yeah, okay.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Okay, so this one's actually kind of similar to that kind of community problem solving mindset. Mia asked what methods were used to engage with residents to alleviate concerns of the density, knowing that some did oppose the developments with concerns of density, and were there engagements with community and resident associations?
Yeah, so I really am a believer in the city's process for development. I think that as much as we complain about how long it takes, it is pretty democratic in my view. So the city's rezoning process requires a public open house. It requires a review from urban design panel. It requires a public hearing. Then the development permit process requires public notification with public feedback. Leslie, you'll remind me if we had another open house at development permit. I'm not sure if we did or not. We didn't,
No.
but it did require public notification, which is signage and postcards and commentary back. And I think that process really allowed us to engage in the way that I described before, especially when the OUV members were present. We just really got to meet people, I think, through that process and explain to them that it was people just like them who were coming to live in that neighborhood. And I think there's something about citizenship that building that idea of citizenship that was permitted through that process.
We also kept in touch. Just for follow up, finishing what Marianne thought, we had really great support at public hearing. People from different co-housing communities came and shared their experience about living in co-housing. The co-housing community in Vancouver and the Lower Mainland has been great. There's been a lot of sharing and support. So they came out to our public hearing. And I also wanted to add that we did keep in touch with the neighbors and especially our immediate neighbors about the development. And and in the end they said they were fine.
Yeah.
I mean, the people we kept in touch with said that they were fine for us to
Yeah, I
proceed
think
with our
that's really
project.
important to note. I think that sometimes there are voices that people who express concern that have every right to express those concerns, and those concerns should be addressed. But at the end of the day, the project was unanimously passed at every stage. So public hearing, urban design panel. We got numerous letters of support for the work. So I think in general, it was welcomed and wanted.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the wonderful discussion and for those of you who have stuck around with us for the extra 15 minutes.